The wind screamed through the frozen forest like a hungry ghost. Snowflakes danced wildly in the air, covering the world in endless white. There were no signs of life, no colors, no sounds, only cold. In the middle of that endless winter, a small figure moved slowly, almost crawling. She was a child, not human, but something close. Her purple skin had turned pale, almost blue, and her large, dark eyes were filled with tears. Her name was Arya. She had not eaten in 2 days. She had not slept in 3. And she had no idea where she was going. All she remembered was the crash. The slave ship had broken in the sky like glass, torn apart by a storm. The guards were screaming, the other captives running. But Arya had jumped. She didn't even know how she survived. She just ran, barefoot in the snow, hoping someone would help. But no one came, not for days. Now she was barely able to walk. Her small body shook with every step. The wind pushed her like it wanted her to fall. And finally she did. Arya dropped to her knees beside a frozen tree. Her fingers were too cold to move. She curled into a ball, shaking, crying quietly. "I don't want to die," she whispered. But the snow didn't care. Her tiny hands held onto something, an old necklace. A round metal pendant with strange markings. It was the only thing left from her mother. She kissed it with frozen lips. Suddenly, her eyes closed. The cold wrapped around her like a blanket. Made of knives, she was slipping away. Then thump, a sound, heavy, slow footsteps in the snow. A shape appeared through the blizzard, tall and strong, covered in thick clothing. Face hidden behind a metal mask, whoever it was. They walked straight toward her. Arya tried to move, but her body wouldn't listen. Her vision blurred, her heart slowing. The figure knelt beside her, gently brushing the snow from her face. She flinched, expecting pain, but the hand was warm. Soft. It held her carefully, as if she were made of glass. He didn't speak, not yet. He just looked at her. She saw his eyes behind the mask, human eyes. "Easy now." The man whispered at last, his voice deep but calm. "You're not dying today." He picked her up, wrapping her in a thick blanket. Arya wanted to ask, "Who are you?" but her mouth didn't work. She was already slipping into unconsciousness, but as she fell asleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. The man walked through the storm, carrying the alien girl in his arms. He moved fast but carefully, his boots crunching through deep snow. Behind them, far in the forest, something moved. Something large, with glowing eyes. It watched them from the trees, then disappeared. They didn't see it, but it saw them. Caleb reached his cabin after half an hour of hard climbing. It was an old wooden shelter, built into the side of a cliff. Smoke rose from its chimney, and a solar lamp flickered near the door. He opened the door with one hand, while holding Arya close to his chest. Inside, the warmth hit like a wave, a roaring fire. Hot soup on the stove, and thick furs on the floor. He placed Arya gently near the fire, removed her wet clothes with care, and wrapped her in dry ones. Then he placed a pot of water beside her and checked her pulse. "Still alive?" he murmured. His name was Caleb Thorne, a former soldier, now a ghost in the woods. He had seen war, loss, and pain. He had come to the mountains to be alone. But now he wasn't alone anymore. Arya breathed slowly, her fingers twitching. She was still unconscious, but she was safe for now. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. "Where did you come from, kid?" he whispered. He looked at the strange pendant in her hand. It glowed faintly with a blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Outside, the storm grew louder. And somewhere in the shadows of the forest, that glowing-eyed creature moved again, closer. Caleb didn't know it yet, but saving the little alien girl would change everything. Not just for him, not just for her, but maybe for the galaxy itself. Arya woke slowly. Like someone rising from a deep ocean, she wasn't cold anymore. The fire crackled nearby, and warm blankets were wrapped tightly around her small body, but everything still felt strange. Unfamiliar, her first instinct was fear. She sat up fast and looked around, eyes wide, heart pounding. Where was she? Was this another prison? Another trap? But then, she saw him, sitting across the room, near a window covered in frost. The human? He was peeling something, a strange round fruit, orange and bumpy. Steam rose from a bowl near him, and his eyes met hers without surprise. "You're awake," he said, his voice low but calm. "No one's gonna hurt you here." Arya didn't reply. She pressed her back against the wall, still holding the pendant close to her chest. The fire flickered, casting shadows on the cabin walls. Everything in the room was made by hand tools, wood, traps, a rifle on the table. But no chains, no cages. The man stood up slowly, careful not to scare her. He placed the bowl of soup near her feet and backed away. "You need to eat," he said. "I don't know what your kind likes, but it's warm, and it won't kill you." Arya watched him with silent suspicion. Then, she reached for the bowl. The soup smelled strange thick, with roots and meat, but she was too hungry to care. She slurped it fast, burning her tongue. But she didn't stop. The man chuckled. "Guess that answers that." She finished that bowl in under a minute. Then her voice came out quiet, broken. "Why did you help me?" He paused before answering. "No reason," he said, staring at the fire. "Just saw someone freezing in the snow." Arya tilted her head. "No one helps my kind. Not like that." He didn't respond. She could tell there was pain behind his silence, pain he didn't want to share. "My name is Arya." She finally said, "What's yours?" "Caleb," he said. "Caleb Thorne." Thunder rolled outside, even though there were no clouds. A sudden burst of wind hit the windows like a scream. The fire flickered again. Arya pulled the blankets tighter, her small body trembling. "Caleb?" "Walk to the window and check the latch. Storm's getting worse," he muttered. "Strangest damn weather I've seen all winter." He pulled down a thick curtain and turned back to her. "I've got backup power, but only enough for heat and lights. You stay here, rest." He moved to the back of the cabin, opened a trapdoor, and disappeared below. Arya sat alone for a moment, the fire crackling softly. Then she stood up slowly, her legs still shaky. She looked around the room, walls lined with maps, radios, and hand-carved animal figures. And something else, a photo. She walked closer. It was a picture of Caleb, standing with two humans. Woman and a little boy. They were smiling, all three. But the photo was cracked down the middle. The woman and child were faded, like ghosts. Arya touched the frame. She understood now. Caleb had lost someone. Maybe that's why he helped her, because he couldn't help them. Suddenly, the cabin shook. She jumped, her heart racing. A strange low growl echoed from outside, deep, unnatural, the kind of sound no forest creature should make. She ran to the window and peeked through the corner of the curtain. First nothing. Then movement, something big, black, and fast, sliding between the trees. She gasped, stumbling back. Caleb burst from the trapdoor, holding a long steel pipe and a strange scanner device. "You saw it, didn't you?" he said sharply. Arya nodded. "It followed me," she whispered. "It's still following me." Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked at the scanner, beeped with faint red dots moving closer. "Damn it," he muttered. "They're hunting." Arya clutched her pendant. "It's because of this," she said, showing him the glowing disc. "They can track it." Caleb took it in his hand, studying the alien symbols. "I've seen tech like this during the war," he said quietly. "You're not just any runaway, are you?" Arya said nothing, but her eyes, wet and frightened, said everything. Caleb stood still for a moment, then turned toward his tools. "I'll board the windows," he said, voice now cold and focused. and set traps in case they get closer. You get some sleep, little one. She watched him hammer metal and wood over the doors. The fire glowed behind him, casting his shadow like a giant across the cabin wall. He moved like someone who had done this before, like a soldier who had seen monsters. And somewhere deep in the forest, those monsters were coming. Hungry, patient, and silent. The storm was only the beginning. The wind had died by morning. The storm was gone, but the silence left behind was worse. Too still, too quiet, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Caleb stood just outside the cabin, shotgun resting in one hand, his boots crunched. Softly in the snow as he circled the perimeter, his eyes scanned the ground, alert and sharp. That's when he saw them. Footprints, not his, not Arias, and not any animal. These tracks were long, wide, and deep. Clawed toes dragged lightly behind each step. The snow around them hadn't melted, but it looked pressed down by something heavy. The pattern was wrong, whatever it was. Ted moved silently through the trees and stopped just 10 feet from the cabin. Then, disappeared, no return steps, just gone. Caleb narrowed his eyes, too smart. He muttered, he crouched, placed his gloved hand over one of the prints, still fresh, still dangerous, behind him. The cabin door creaked open. Arya stepped out. Wrapped in Caleb's oversized coat, her pendant glowing faintly. "I felt it," she whispered, in my sleep. Something was near. Caleb looked back at her. "You weren't wrong," he said, pointing at the prints. "Whatever left those. It came close last night." Arya stared at the marks, her expression darkening. "It's a hunter." She said softly, "They use them to chase down escaped slaves." Caleb stood and stepped between her and the forest. "It won't get you here," he said firmly. "I've faced worse." But deep inside, he wasn't sure. Something about these prints, it wasn't just dangerous. It was thinking. Back inside, Caleb powered up his old tablet, connected to his radar scanner. The red dot blinked again, moving slowly around the edge of the valley. "It's circling," he said, more to himself than her, not charging in. Just watching, Arya sat near the fire, her legs pulled to her chest. She felt the pendant vibrating faintly now, I think. "It's reading my signal," she said. "This pendant is from my mother. It links to my identity." Caleb looked over at her. "You said you escaped a slave ship, right?" She nodded. "I was taken from my homeworld, but I don't remember much. I only remember my mother saying, 'Don't let them take this.' And she pressed the pendant into my hand." Caleb thought for a moment that pendant it wasn't just personal. It was valuable, maybe even royal. He pulled down a heavy map from the shelf, unrolling it across the table. "Look here," he said, pointing, "this region. Nothing but dead zones and abandoned satellites. No one lives here anymore, just me. So how did a tracker get this far into the mountains?" He continued, "It's not looking for food, it's looking for you." Arya swallowed hard, her voice cracked. "I don't want to be taken again." "You won't be," Caleb said, loading shells into his shotgun. "I've got sensors, traps, and 2 backup generators. If it steps too close, we end it." But even as he spoke, another alert buzzed across the screen. Another red dot, then a second, then a third. Caleb's hand froze. "This isn't just one tracker anymore," he said slowly. "They've sent a pack." He stood, pacing the floor, planning, thinking. "They're forming a net," he said, "pushing you toward something, toward capture or kill." Araya's eyes filled with fear. She looked at him like he was the only solid thing in her world. "Then what do we do?" Caleb turned, his eyes like steel. "We move first," he said. "There's a place deep in the canyon, an old tower. Hasn't worked in years, but I might be able to fix it. Maybe send a signal. Maybe call someone who gives a damn." He handed her a small radio. "If we get separated, Press this button, he said. I'll come find you. Arya held it like it was gold. You're risking a lot, she said. Why? Caleb paused at the door, grabbing his gear, then looked over his shoulder. Because I'm not going to let the last good thing in this galaxy get taken, he said. Not again, outside. The snow began to fall again, soft but steady, each flake landing on top of a trail of monstrous prints, covering them, but not erasing them. The hunt had begun. But Caleb and Arya weren't prey anymore. They were survivors, and they were about to fight back. Asterisk, the wind picked up again, this time sharper, colder. Caleb tightened the straps of his pack and pulled a thick hood over Arya's head. She stood beside him, her small hand gripping the edge of his coat. They were leaving the cabin behind. Everything familiar, gone. Now there was only snow, danger, and the path ahead. But the path was no normal trail. It led downward into a place most locals never dared speak of, the Ice Canyon. Arya looked down from the high cliff, her breath catching. The canyon was deep and narrow, with frozen walls that shimmered like glass. Broken metal stuck out in places, crashed ships. Old machines, abandoned tech. Did a battle happen here? She asked softly. Caleb nodded. Long ago, he said. Fleet versus fleet, no survivors. Okay, no. No one came to collect the dead. Now it was a graveyard, but also a shortcut. They had to move fast. The trackers were closing in from behind. Their red signal dots were no longer blinking on the scanner. They were steady, locked in. They knew where Arya was heading, and they were pushing her toward something. Still, Caleb led the way. Rifle strapped across his back, Arya followed close, sometimes slipping, but never falling. The air grew colder the deeper they went. But there was no turning back now. After 2 hours of hard climbing, they reached a large frozen bridge, half natural, half metal. Below it, the canyon floor dropped into shadows, too deep to see. Above them, broken ship wings jutted out like bones from the cliffs. Arya's pendant began to glow again, this time brighter. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and she felt her skin tingle. Something here was reacting to her. I think this place remembers me, she whispered. Caleb gave her a glance, or maybe she remembered it. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoed behind them. Then a howl, long and metallic, followed by sharp scratching along the ice. Run, Caleb shouted, grabbing Arya's hand. They bolted across the frozen bridge. Just as they reached the center, something heavy landed behind them. Arya turned, her eyes widened. It was one of the trackers, twice as tall as Caleb. Its body covered in armor made of bone and tech. A red light blinked in its chest. And its mouth was not a mouth but a speaker. Return the asset, it said in a dead voice. Resist and be terminated. Caleb raised his rifle, fired twice. The bullets bounced off its armor, barely slowing it down. He shouted, "Jump!" Arya looked over the side down into the icy canyon floor. "No," she cried. "We'll die." "Better than getting caught," he said. Then he grabbed her and leaped. The fall was fast and freezing. Snow whipped around them, then crash. They landed in a deep pile of powder and broken metal. It knocked the air out of them, but they were alive. The tracker above howled again, pacing the bridge, searching, but it didn't jump, couldn't. It moved back, vanishing into the shadows. Caleb sat up, groaning, his coat torn and shoulder bleeding. "You okay?" he asked. Arya nodded weakly. "You're bleeding," she said, worried. "I've had worse," he muttered. They looked around. The bottom of the canyon was eerie silent, glowing slightly from ice walls. But one structure stood out tall, black and still standing, the old Cum Tower. It leaned to one side, but looked mostly intact. Arya's pendant flashed faster as they approached, as if something inside was calling to it, inside the tower. Dust and frost covered every console. Dead screens lined the walls. But Caleb moved like he knew this place he did. He had helped design these towers during the last war. "Give me time," he said. "I can power this," as he worked. Arya explored. She found a broken chair, a melted data pad, and then a small glowing crystal embedded in the wall. She touched it, and suddenly, hologram filled the room. It showed a woman tall with purple skin like Arya's. Her voice echoed gently to my daughter, Arya. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone, but you are not lost." Caleb looked up from the console, stunned. "That your mother?" he asked. Arya nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. The message continued. "You carry our blood, our hope, our power. Trust no one, except the one who brings you warmth in the cold." She turned to Caleb, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Above them, snow began falling again. But inside that tower, something was being rebuilt. Not just an old signal, but a bond between a human who had lost everything and an alien girl who just might be the key to saving a dying galaxy. The tower groaned with old metal as Caleb worked on the broken panels. Sparks flew, wires hissed, but finally one screen lit up. A soft hum filled the cold air, like the tower was waking from a long sleep. Arya sat quietly on the floor, watching. The last flickers of her mother's hologram fade. She was shaking. Not from cold, but from everything she had just seen. "My mother." She whispered, "She knew I'd come here." Caleb nodded, wiping frost from his beard. "She left you a message, a warning, and a place means she was smart and she cared." Suddenly, the hum turned into static. The screen cracked again to the scanner in Caleb's bag, beeped loud and fast. He pulled it out, miles narrowing. "Something's coming," he said. Not one, not two, but just one. A single signal, moving fast, straight toward the tower. Caleb grabbed his shotgun and stepped outside. The snow had turned from gentle to heavy, falling in thick waves. Arya followed behind him, her pendant glowing like a lantern. Then, through the fog, they saw it. The creature was tall, armored, and bent forward like a hungry animal. Its eyes glowed red through the snow, and its arms ended in bladed fingers. Metal bones clicked as it walked, and steam hissed from vents on its back. But it wasn't rushing. It was watching. Caleb raised the shotgun. "You come one step closer." The creature raised its claw through something onto the snow. A small black cubit blinked 3 times, then projected a voice. But not just any voice, a human voice. "Caleb Thorne," it said. "You're protecting stolen property." Caleb froze. Arya stepped behind him, confused. "Who's speaking?" she asked. The voice continued. "The girl is not what she seems. She is not a child. She is a biological weapon, disguised in a young form." Arya gasped. "That's a lie." Caleb looked between her and the creature, his hands shaking. The voice returned. "She is designed to manipulate, to charm, to survive at any cost. She will drain your kindness and turn it into power." Then the voice stopped. The cube went dark. The creature stood silent, waiting. Arya stared at Caleb, her eyes wide, tears welling up. "I'm not a weapon," she said. "I didn't even know who I was until now. I'm scared. I'm alone. Why would I lie?" Caleb lowered his gun slightly, but doubt was there. He couldn't deny it. She didn't look like a threat, but what if they had built her that way? What if all this emotion was just programming? Then Arya did something unexpected. She removed the pendant from her neck hand, dropped it in the snow. It flickered and dimmed. "Take it," she said to the creature. "If I'm just a weapon, then I don't want it. I don't want power. I just want someone to believe me." The creature stepped forward slowly. Caleb raised the gun again. "No," he said firmly. "She's with me." And then he fired. The shot hit the creature's chest, sending it stumbling back. But instead of roaring, it spoke. Test complete, it said calmly. Emotional response confirmed. Subject Arya stable, unprogrammed. Then, its body locked in place, frozen. The armor-cracked tand fell off, revealing something shocking beneath. A humanoid woman, tall, alien, but gentle-looking. Her skin was silver, her eyes bright. "Gold, I'm not your enemy," she said. "I was sent by your mother." Arya fell to her knees, overwhelmed. "What? What are you talking about?" "I am the last guardian," the woman said softly. "My mission was to test your protector's loyalty and your own choices. If either failed, you were not ready." Caleb stared in disbelief. "You nearly got us both killed, but—" "You didn't run," the woman said. "You fought for her. And she gave up her power for you." Arya's pendant glowed again, this time a different color. Not blue, but green. The woman bowed slowly. "Now you are ready for what comes." Next, the snow fell gently again, but now it felt different. Not like a storm, but like a beginning. Asterisk, the silver-skinned woman, the guardian, stood tall and still in the center of the old tower. Her glowing eyes flickered once, then dimmed. "I've done my part," she said quietly. "Now they will come." Caleb frowned, stepping forward. "Who?" She turned toward him, the real hunters, before he could speak again. The ground shook. A distant roar rolled through the canyon like thunder. Far off, lights blinked in the dark red. Fast, and many, dozens of tracker units sliding through. Snow, dropping from cliffs, crawling over ice like insects. "They're already here," Arya whispered. Fear rising in her throat, the guardian stepped back. Placing her hand on the tower's core, a pulse of energy ran through the wall. "For 20 minutes, I can hold them off," she said. "After that, this tower will burn." "What do you mean?" Caleb asked. The guardian looked at him with soft eyes. "I was never meant to survive." The floor beneath them vibrated again. Snow began falling through the broken roof, and wind screamed through shattered glass. Caleb grabbed his bag and turned to Arya. "We're not staying to watch her die," he said firmly. "We move now." "But where?" Arya cried. "There's no way out." "There is," Caleb said, pointing to the far corner of the tower. Old tunnels, emergency escape shafts built under the tower floor. He kicked away a pile of debris, revealing a narrow hatch, cold. Metal stairs vanished into darkness. He turned to the guardian one last time. "You sure you can hold them?" She nodded. "Go." Caleb opened the hatch and dropped down first. Then reached up and pulled Arya into his arms. They slid into the dark, the metal echoing beneath their feet. Behind them, the tower shook again. The guardian's voice echoed. One last time, "Run," as they moved through the tunnel. Arya could still hear the battle above. Gunfire, explosions, metal clashing against metal. The sound of the guardian's final stand. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the canyon base. Caleb's flashlight flickered, but they kept going. Arya's pendant glowed faintly, guiding them toward something. Then they hit a wall. Not a dead end, a sealed door. Caleb examined the panel beside it. Faded buttons, broken lock, no power. "I can fix it," Arya said quickly. She reached into her coat and pulled a small crystal from her pendant, plugged it into the wall panel. Lights blinked, gears turned. The door slowly opened, just a crack but enough to slip through. On the other side was a buried ship, an escape pod. Old but intact, covered in vines and frost. Caleb looked around, stunned. This was here all along. "My mother must have placed it here," Arya said softly. "For me." Just then an explosion rocked the tunnel. Flames burst from the path behind them. The heat chased them fast. "Get in!" Caleb shouted, lifting Arya into the pod. He jumped in behind her, slammed the hatch, and hit the ignition. The pod shook. Sparks flew. The engine coughed. For a second, it seemed like it might fail. Then boom, the old thrusters fired. And the pod launched straight through a vertical tunnel. Rock and snow crumbled around them as they burst out into the open sky. Below them, the tower erupted in flame. A wave of fire followed them, reaching high into the air like a final warning. The Guardian was gone, but they were alive. The pod soared through the storm. Engine failing, alarms blaring. Caleb gripped the controls, struggling to steer. We're coming down hard. Arya held on to him, burying her face into his coat. I'm not afraid, she whispered. Not if I'm with you. The pod crashed into a snowy ridge, bounced and rolled, finally stopped. Silence. Then, a weak laugh. Caleb opened his eyes, sore, bleeding but alive. Arya groaned beside him. You okay? He asked. She smiled. Barely. You always ask me that. Outside? The fire in the distance still glowed in the sky. The storm slowly began to fade, and above them stars broke through the clouds for the first time in days. They had survived, but the fight wasn't over now. It was time to find out why Arya was worth dying for. The crash site was quiet. Ash fell gently from the sky, like black snow. The pod lay tilted in the snowbank, half buried, half burning, but inside, there was life. Caleb pulled himself from the wreckage, coughing, holding his ribs. He turned and reached for Arya, who lay unconscious but breathing. Come on, kid, he whispered. We're not done yet. He lifted her into his arms and stumbled into the cold wind. Around them, the storm was finally gone. What remained was silence, stars, and distant echoes of fire as they crested a snowy ridge. Caleb stopped in his tracks. Lights blinked in. The sky growing larger, not red tracker, lights blue and gold. A ship descended quietly, sleek and shining like a beacon in the dark. It hovered above the snow, then lowered a ramp. Caleb stared, eyes wide. Arya stirred weakly in his arms. Her pendant glowed again, this time bright gold. A signal had been received from the ship. A woman stepped out, tall, dressed in robes with the same symbol etched into her chest. She looked part military, part royalty. Her skin was the same shade as Arya's. Her hair long and braided. She bowed deeply. You brought her to us, she said, against all odds. Caleb stood still, confused. Who are you? We are the last of her people, she said. She is not just a child. She is a symbol, the last voice of a fallen race. Arya opened her eyes, blinking at the lights above. Where are we? She asked. You're safe now, the woman said. You were born to speak for those who no longer can. You are the chosen heir of the free world's pact. Arya looked up at Caleb. Her hand found his. I don't want to go without him, she said. He's my protector. The woman smiled gently. Then he comes too, inside the ship. Arya was given medical care, warm food, and new clothes. But she never let go of Caleb's hand. Not for a second. The ship flew through quiet stars. And soon they arrived at a space station unlike any other, a floating city with banners of many alien races. Crowds waited as the ship docked. Leaders, journalists, soldiers, children, everyone gathered to see her. A small alien girl once left to die in the snow, now walking beside a human, hand in hand. The great chamber was silent as she stepped forward. Lights above focused on her. She swallowed nervously, then turned to Caleb. What do I say? Just speak your truth, he said. That's more than most ever do. Arya took a breath, and then she spoke. Her voice, small but steady, filled the hall. I was born in chains, she said. I was hunted, hurt, forgotten, but someone who didn't know me gave me warmth, not because I had power, but because I was alive. She looked around. I ask you all, how many children like me are still out there, waiting for someone to care? How many are frozen, afraid, and alone in the dark? She raised her hand. If one human, a stranger, could carry me through fire and storm. Then we have no excuse. We can do better. Silence again, and then applause. Real, raw, and loud. Leaders stood. People cried. Even hardened soldiers lowered their heads in respect. Caleb stood in the back, quiet. He didn't need the spotlight. Just seeing her standing tall, proud, alive was enough. Later, Arya found him sitting alone. She sat beside him, swinging her feet. "You still don't like crowds," she said. "Not my thing." He smirked. "You did good." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're stuck with me now." She whispered, "I hope you know that." He smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Outside the window, stars drifted by. The galaxy was still broken, still healing, but somewhere in its heart a little alien girl had found her voice. And a human had found something he thought was lost forever: hope.